8 Most Drunk. Johnny Carson. Guests of all time. For 30 years, Johnny Carson ruled late night. Every evening, he walked onto the Tonight Show stage, calm and sharp, and welcomed Hollywood's biggest stars onto that famous couch. Most nights, everything ran like a well-oiled machine. But not every guest showed up sober. Long before publicists controlled every move, and social media could destroy a career overnight, some celebrities arrived at NBC's Burbank studios after just one more drink or 3. The result was live television that felt like it could fall apart at any second. Today, we're counting down 8 of the most famously drunk guests ever to wobble their way onto Johnny's stage. Moments NBC executives would have loved to bury, but viewers never forgot. 1. Truman Capote. In 1980, author Truman Capote walked out from behind the curtain, and everyone could tell something was wrong. The man who wrote In Cold Blood and Breakfast at Tiffany's could barely make it to his chair without stumbling. From Johnny's first polite, "It's great to have you with us tonight," it was obvious Capote was badly drunk. His answers came out as slurred, mumbling. Carson leaned in again and again asking, "I'm sorry. What was that?" Capote tried to tell stories, including one about Montgomery Clift, but they wandered so much they never really began or ended. At one point he tried to sip water, missed half the glass, and ended up with a wet spot down his shirt while continuing to talk as if nothing happened. After about 17 minutes, Johnny finally bailed out with an early commercial. Backstage, he reportedly joked, "That wasn't an interview. It was a hostage situation in slow motion." Capote never came back on The Tonight Show during Problem. Carson's remaining years. 2. Shelley Winters, the hurricane guest. Two-time Oscar winner Shelley Winters didn't just have a drink before the show. She arrived like a full-blown storm. By 1974, the staff already had a Shelley plan. Never put her on first, and hope she sobered up a little while waiting. She usually didn't. That year, booked to promote her autobiography, she staggered slightly in high heels and ignored Johnny's questions from the start. Instead, she launched into wild stories that had nothing to do with her book. When a young actor came out as the next guest, Winters kept cutting him off, putting a hand on his knee and announcing to the audience, "His movie isn't very good, but he's pretty to look at." The breaking point came when she grabbed Johnny's stack of note cards out of his hand and tossed them over her shoulder, saying, "You won't be needing these, Johnny. I'm much more interesting." Carson went to a commercial early and later said, "If she's ever booked again, I'm taking that night off." She didn't return for nearly 3 years, finally coming back in 1977 under strict conditions, including an earlier taping time to reduce the chances of heavy drinking. 3. Dean Martin, when the drunk act became real. For years, Dean Martin played the lovable drunk. The glass, the loose tie, the lazy grin. Much of it was an act. But by the mid-1970s, real drinking was catching up with him. During a 1976 appearance, Martin came out as the lead guest, supposedly to promote an NBC special. He nearly missed his chair. His slur was much heavier than usual, and when Johnny asked about the special, Dean blinked and said, "What special?" He mixed up The Tonight Show with The Merv Griffin Show, started singing Everybody Loves Somebody out of nowhere, and asked, "What time is it?" even though he'd just sat down. Carson ended the segment early. Staff later remembered Johnny saying, "Dean made drunk look classy until it didn't." After that, Dean's visits became much rarer. 4. Raymond Burr, when Perry Mason lost control. As Perry Mason, Raymond Burr was the picture of calm authority. That's why his 1,970 drunk appearance shocked everyone. He showed up 40 minutes late, clearly intoxicated. Once on stage, instead of answering Johnny's questions about his work, Burr launched into a long, meandering lecture about his orchid collection and greenhouses in Fiji. He talked about flowers for nearly 10 minutes. When Carson finally tried the safest question possible, asking about playing Perry Mason, Burr stared at him and asked, "What did you say your name was again?" Johnny shook his hand and replied, "Johnny Carson. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Burr." After the show, Carson ordered a new rule. Every guest had to be checked by a staffer shortly before going on. Burr was never invited back during Johnny's run. 5. Orson Welles. When Orson Welles visited, The Tonight Show became a late-night lecture hall. In 1975, after reportedly drinking several bottles of wine backstage, he came out sweating, flushed, and already mid-speech. Without waiting for a question, Welles launched into a 14-minute monologue about Shakespeare, theater, Hollywood, and whatever else crossed his mind. He slurred at times, but his ideas were still sharp. At one point, he tried to quote King Lear, forgot the lines, and simply made up new Shakespeare on the spot, so convincingly that most viewers never noticed. When he finally paused, Johnny just said, "We need to take a break." Even after that, Welles was always welcomed back. As one NBC executive put it, even drunk, he was more interesting than most people sober. 6. Zsa Zsa Gabor. In 1973, Zsa Zsa Gabor turned up extra sparkly and extra drunk. She nearly caught a heel in the carpet coming out, kissed Johnny somewhere near the ear instead of the cheek, and spoke with an accent so thick even Carson struggled to follow. Instead of talking about her book, she showed off her bracelet to the camera and bragged, "Worth more than all the NBC executives combined." She slid closer and closer to Johnny, put a hand on his knee, and asked loudly, "Why talk about boring books when we could discuss your bedroom, Johnny?" When she tried to stand for a dramatic point about her latest divorce, she almost fell forward and had to be caught. Johnny ended the segment and helped her off stage. After that, the staff jokingly called their new scheduling rule the Zaza Protocol. Book her earlier in the day so there was less time for vodka. 7. Oliver Reed. British actor Oliver Reed, famous for his talent and wild drinking, is the only person on this list who never actually sat down with Carson. In 1973, Reed was booked to promote The Three Musketeers. But after NBC saw tapes of him drunkenly causing trouble on other shows, threatening to drop his trousers on one Australian program, Johnny made a rare call. The booking was cancelled. For a host who usually believed he could handle anyone, Reed was the line. As one writer said, he drank like it was his job and talked like it wasn't. 8. Peter O'Toole, the most eloquent drunk on TV. In 1978, Peter O'Toole came on The Tonight Show after what he called a proper lunch, meaning lots of scotch. He was there to promote Caligula, but as soon as he sat down, he complained about the studio lighting, then launched into a long speech about classical acting. His words were polished, his train of thought less so. When Johnny mentioned fencing, O'Toole suddenly jumped up, grabbed Johnny's pen like a sword, and ordered, "Stand up, Johnny." For about 3 minutes, he gave Carson an impromptu fencing lesson, shouting commands like, "Parry," as though your virtue depends on it. They eventually sat down again, and instead of talking about the movie, O'Toole told stories about drinking with Richard Harris and a 3-day bender in Dublin. Even so, he stayed charming, funny, and strangely graceful. One writer later called him the most eloquent drunk in television history. In the end, these chaotic nights showed why Johnny Carson was the king. No matter how drunk the guest, he stayed calm, quick, and in control, while millions watched, live with no safety net.